Hi, and welcome to this, the third in a series of talks on Chaucer, focusing particularly on the Canterbury Tales and the Wife of Bath's Tale. We're going to start this lecture by looking at the prologue to the Wife of Bath's Tale, where she introduces her to her audience and gives us a flavor of her experiences and her view of the world. And funny enough, that's the very word she begins with, experienza. She's saying, I am basing my views on my experience, not on my education, not on my status or my privilege the way men do. She says, no, I've lived a real life. I've gone to the school of hard knocks, so to speak, and I know what I'm talking about based on that experience. Even though you guys won't view it as an authority, it's good enough for me. Experienza though non auctorite were in this world were richt enough to me. And it's particularly good enough for her in order to address her theme, which is to speak of woe that is in marriage, to speak about how unhappy marriage can be. For lordings, let me tell you, since I was 12 year of age, thanked be God that is etern on leave, husbands at church door, ye have had fever. She's saying basically, I've had 5 husbands. I know what I'm talking about. Okay. For I so oft have I wedded be, and she says, and all were worthy men in their degree. You go, that's really typical Chaucerian language there, to kind of give with one hand and take away with the other hand. Oh, I need to pause because I have a cat here. Hang on. Sorry, that was Mimi the cat. Likes to interrupt my recordings occasionally. Okay, so she says, yeah, they were all worthy men. And that's just the way Chaucer talks about his characters. Oh, they were worthy, fine people, lovely people. And then there's always a wee catch. Like the cook, great cook, but he's got a sore on his knee. Okay. Well, here she says, they were all worthy men in their degree. What does that mean? It could mean they were worthy men in terms of their status. They were high enough up in society to be worthy. Or does it mean in their individual degree? They were all worthy, more or less, each of them, kind of. And you realize maybe she's taking away some of that compliment. But she says, me was told certain not long ago that sith the Christ went never but honest to wedding in the Cana of Galilee, by that same ensample taught he me that I ne should wedded be but honest. She says, I was told once, as if it was an absolute certainty, you should never be married more than once because Jesus only went to one wedding. And she says, that as a piece of textual evidence from the Bible, she's thinking, that seems less than authoritative to me. I'm going to tackle it. And she's surrounded by people who are in the church, and she has no qualms about standing up to them and debating the meaning of the Bible. So the story is, Christ did attend a wedding at Cana, and that's where he did his first miracle, turning water into wine. And in her prologue, the Wife of Bath begins by contradicting exegetes of John's Gospel, and that's the word we use when we talk about extracting meaning from the Bible, interpretations. That's exegetical study. But she debates those who say that by attending only one wedding, Christ taught us that a person should only marry once. She says, I'm not buying that, okay? She says, beside a well, Jesus, who was both God and man, spake in reproof of the Samaritan. Jesus told the Samaritan off, saying, thou hast had 5 husbands, and this same man, the which that hath now thee, is not thine husband. Thus said he, certain, and there's that word again, certain. Well, the Wife of Bath is introducing an air of uncertainty. She's raising doubt, and that is a very profound, radical thing to be doing. She says, what that he meant thereby, I cannot say. You know, the church figures are saying, it's absolutely clear, you should only marry once. And she says, oh, I'm not so sure that it's so clear. In other words, the text is up for debate now, thanks to the Wife of Bath. She says, but that I ask, why that the 5th man was no husband of the Samaritan? How many might she have in marriage? Yet heard I never tell, and in mine age upon this number definition. She says, why 5? Was 4 okay? 3 okay? 2? What? She's really pinning them down on the detail. She says, let me tell you, men may divine and glozen up and down. Now she's talking about the men of the church who can divine. Now listen, there's a lot of meaning to the word divine. First off, it means a guess. They can try to divine the answer. Oh, how many times are we allowed to be married? She's basically implying they're not scholars. It's guesswork. But at the same time, the word divine means a god. To be divine is to be godlike. And that word as a noun is sometimes applied to men in the church, that they are a divine, that they are somehow connected with God. So that's got a lot of ambiguity in it there, just in that word. And then she says, and they can glozen up and down. That up and down makes it sound like, oh, they could do this all day long. Glozen means to debate the definitions of these words. That's where we get the word glossary, where you look up the meanings of words. They're debating the meaning of these words. She says, oh, they could do that all day with their little arguments, but well I woot, that is, well I know, express that directly, without lie, this bit of the Bible. God told us for to wax and multiply. He bade us to go forth and multiply. That gentle text can ye well understand. She says, that's a little bit of the Bible that I think is very clear. We're supposed to go out and multiply. And you say, wow, well, she's answered this whole wedding thing quite clearly. And that's quite an earthy sentiment that she would like in the Bible, because she obviously has had many relationships. She's obviously been very sexual her whole life. And you think, well, that's a part of the Bible she likes. And then you remember, oh, hang on, no children that we know of. Never had any children. So she hasn't really followed through on the multiplying part. Why? Don't know. Maybe it's biological and it's nothing to do with her. But that's just the kind of detail Chaucer likes to drop in to make us wonder and debate the nature of these views that characters are putting forward. Then she starts the biblical textual debate. She says, lo, here the wise king Don Solomon, I true he had weavers more than on. She says, well, Solomon had many wives, as would God it leaveful were to me to be refreshed half so oft as he. She says, oh, I wouldn't mind being refreshed. She's talking about sex here, half as often as Solomon was if he was sleeping with all these wives. So this is not your ordinary, Bible class. She's putting her own very earthy spin on this, and you can imagine church figures being very uncomfortable with this, but she bravely is pushing forward with it. And she says, and a blessed be God that I have wedded 5, of which I've picked out the best. She says, oh, I picked out the best husbands. And by best, what does she mean? She means best both in terms of their nether purse and of their chest. Nether meaning down below, and the chest being the chest where they keep their money. She's basically saying, both sexually and financially, I picked the best. Oh, isn't that touching? She would not have been writing Valentine's Day cards with those sorts of sentiments. She says, diverse schools make perfect clerks, and diverse practice in many sundry works maketh the workman perfect securely. She says, she's quoting an old saying that says you want to get clerks coming from different schools and that they work together the best. She says, that's why I bring in a whole variety of husbands, and you want plenty of variety. She says, of 5 husbands schooling am I, and I welcome the 6th whenever he shall. It's like basically saying the more husbands, the merrier. Thank you very much. Very much not in the spirit of you should only marry once. Then she points out that when my current husband is from the world y-gone, some Christian man shall wed me anon, because for then the apostle saith that I am free to wed. She says, I know in the Bible I'm told that when I become a widow, I am free to remarry where it liketh me, wherever I like. Because Paul in Corinthians, he saith that to be wedded is no sin, and better it is to be wedded than to brin. So if you look at Corinthians chapters 8 and 9, 1 Corinthians, he basically says, listen, if if you are unmarried or a widow, I say it's better to remain unmarried. But if they can't control themselves, let them marry. It's better that they get married than they misbehave in some way. And she's plucking that out, saying, there you go, more biblical evidence that I'm fine with what I'm doing. Right. Then she pushes further and says, and I don't want to hear any more talk about virginity and how great virginity is. She says, I pray you telleth me, where commanded he virginity? I know as well as ye it is no dread. The apostle, when he speaketh of maidenhead, he said that precept thereof had he none. Men may counsel a woman to be one, but counseling is no commandment. She says, the Bible may advise that virginity is a great thing. She says, but that kind of advice is not a commandment, and it doesn't appear in the Ten Commandments. Thus meaning, he put it in our own judgment. For had God commanded maidenhead, if he had commanded that people remain virgins, well, then he damned wedding with the deed. No one's going to get married. And certain, if there was no seed sown, virginity, whereof then should it grow? She says, where are you going to get all these virgins if people aren't reproducing? She says, so she's basically dismantled that argument about virginity now. Oh, and then as if we hadn't got enough detail, she's going to tell us about how she behaves in her marriage. And she says, I am not precious. I'm not very fine in particular. In wifehood, I will use mine instrument as freely as my Maker hath it sent. And yes, you've guessed it, by her instrument, she means her sexual equipment. She says, why did he give it to us if we weren't supposed to use it? If I be dangerous, God give me sorrow. By dangerous, she means stingy. Nope, my husband shall it have both eve and morway, morning and night, when that him list to come forth and pay his debt. Now there's a couple things going on here. She's saying, yes, sex all the time. That's what it's about. And you can just see other people going, which version of the Bible is she reading? You know? Well, she says, first of all, look at the language. She says that her husband shall come forth and pay his debt. There's a couple things going on here. First of all, that's financial language. So she is mixing up a description of the sexual act with a financial transaction, as if you owe somebody money and you have to pay it off. And she's basing that on a text in the Bible that suggests that man and wife own each other's bodies, that they have given themselves to each other. And that's a kind of spiritual exchange, but she's picking it up as if it's a financial exchange. She thinks about marriage in terms of money. So yes, he shall pay his debt. She says, and a husband I will have, I will not let, which shall be both my debtor and my thrall, and have his tribulation withal upon his flesh, while that I am his wife. I have the power during all my life upon his proper body, and not he. She says, I own his body. I can do with it what I want. He doesn't own it because we're married. She says, oh, right thus the apostle told it unto me, and bade our husbands for to love us well. All this sentence me liketh every deal. So she's taking this part of the Bible that says, listen, we own one another in marriage. And she's saying, she's looking at her from her angle and saying, right, I own him. There we go. And that provokes the partner to stand up and say, now, Dama, quote he, by God and by St. John, you've been a noble preacher in this case. I was about to wed a wife, alas, but why should I buy it on my flesh so dear? Yet had I never wedded no wife to year. She says, boy, I'm glad I heard you talk about this, because you're talking me out of marriage, thanks very much. And her reply is so abrupt. Abide, quoth she, my tale is not begun. Nay, thou shalt drinken of another tun. In other words, sit down, keep drinking, and listen, I'm not through yet. So she's not one to be talked across, even by someone who supposedly represents the church. Now, her first three husbands, they are old and wealthy, and they die. And she kind of pushes them towards death's door through all this sex. I think she's hoping they're going to have a heart attack eventually. Things start to get a bit tricky with her fourth husband. She says he was a reveler. He was a party guy. And that's to say he also had a paramour. He had a mistress. He was having an affair. things aren't really going her way at this point with the fourth husband. And then the fifth husband becomes an entirely different kettle of fish. My fifth husband, God his soul bless, which that I took for love and no richesse. He sometime was a clerk of Oxenford. So he's a scholar or a scribe based in Oxford. And she fell in love with him. And she emphasizes again and again, that's where my troubles began. Okay, so she's saying, don't treat marriage as anything to do with love. It's about money and material security. Okay. Now, it gets worse when we find out, how did she meet and fall in love with her husband? Well, the fifth husband was a scholar, a clerk named Jenkin. And he was attached to their household when she was still married to the fourth husband. And when the fourth husband dies, at the funeral, Jenkin is one of the pallbearers. So her fourth husband is on the bier, that is on the apparatus that they bring the body on. And she says, and I weep all gate and made sorry cheers as weaves mooten, for it is usage. She says, oh, and I was doing all the crying that we're supposed to do. When she says usage, she says, because that's what you're supposed to do, as wives must. And with my coverchief I covered my visage, but for that I was purveyed of a macca. He wept but small, and that he undertook it. She's like saying, it's like I was putting on a bit of a mask. I didn't actually cry that much, but I'm playing the role. And you're going, wow, she really didn't have any attachment to the fourth husband. Gets worse though. To church was mine husband born a moreway, with neighbours that for him maiden sorroway. They're all carrying the fourth husband, and there's tears. And Jenkin, our clerk, was one of those. He's one of the pallbearers, as help me God. When that I saw him go after the bier, carrying the body, the casket, and she sees Jenkin carrying it, and what does she think? Methought he had a pair of legs and of feet so clean and fair, that all mine heart I gave unto his hold. She's looking at one of the pallbearers saying, he has nice legs. Okay. Chaucer just drops these details in and says, there you go. This is people for you. Have a think about that. He was, she says, I true, a 20 winter old, and I was 40, if I shall say sooth. But yet I had always a coltis tooth. She says, yeah, he was 20 and I was 40, but you know me, the phrase to have a colt's tooth meant, oh, I was always interested, gap-toothed I was. And again, there's this myth back in the medieval period that women who had a gap between their front teeth meant that they were very sexually active, And that became me well. I had the print of St. Venus' seal. And Venus, of course, is the goddess of love. And she's saying, oh, that's just the way I was. But of course, she hasn't been all about love up till now. She's been about money. And now she's letting her heart and her sexual attraction run away with her. Well, this marriage goes badly wrong, and one of the key points of dispute between her and her husband is this book that he has. Jenkin reads a book every night called, he called it Valerie and Theophrast. She calls it the Book of Wicked Wives. It is a book, he says, he had a book that gladly night and day, for his desport, for his amusement, he would read always. He cleaped it Valerie and Theophrast. Well, Theophrastus, as you see the note below, was the supposed author of a book called The Golden Book of Marriage, which was very much an anti-feminist work that was found bound in an anthology with Jerome's letter against Jovinian, which also contains anti-feminist material, and Walter Mapp's the advice of Valerius to Rufinus not to marry. You get the tone of what's going on in that text. So Valerie and Theophrastus are a couple of these kind of anti-women, anti-marriage authors. This is basically a big collection of every story someone could find that shows women in a bad light and that argues against marriage. And this is the man she loves, and she thinks that's how he amuses himself, by reading about how terrible women are. She says, by God, if women had written stories, as clerks have within their oratories, they would then have written of men more wickedness than all the mark of Adam may address. She says, here's the thing, that book was written by men. Give me a book written by women, and the stories would be completely different. To reading on this book of wicked wives, he knew of them more legends and lives than there been of good wives in the Bible. Okay? And when I saw that he would never finish to read on this cursed book all night, all suddenly 3 leaves have I plight out of his book, right as he read. She basically tore 3 pages out of the book. And guys, I mean, this would be weird enough if I came over and took your copy of Chaucer and just went shh and ripped 3 pages out. You'd think, hey, that cost me £12, you know. A book in the Middle Ages was worth a lot because they were all handwritten and bound. This is not a printed document, okay? So you have invested a lot of money in a book, and she ripped 3 pages out of it. This is a metaphorical representation of what the wife of Bath stands for. She's standing up against the authority of books as written by men. So out of his book, even as he was reading, thump, and also, eke is also, and eke, I with my fist so took him on the cheek that in our fire he fell backwards adown. So, thump, 3 pages with this hand, boom, right to the cheek, into the fireplace he goes. Sorry, do you need a more spirited character for your feminist tale here? I mean, this woman doesn't back down, right? And up he started as doth a wood lion. Wood means mad or crazy. And up he pops like a mad lion. And with his fist he smote me on the head, that on the floor I lay as if I were dead. I mean, this is a domestic brawl breaking out here. And now he's flattened her, and she's lying on the floor as if she were dead. And when he saw how still that I lay, he was aghast, and would have fled his way, till at last out of my swoon I breathed. Oh, hast thou slain me, false thief, I said, and for my land thus hast thou murdered me. In other words, she owns property from all her previous marriages. Ere I be dead, yet will I kiss thee. So, look, there's a balance here. She's basically saying, you nasty piece of, you false thief, you trying to kill me so you can take my property, right? At the same time, she says, yet before I die, come here, give me one last kiss. Little ambiguous, right? And near he came, thinking, oh my God, I've killed her. I didn't mean to kill her. And kneeled fair down and said, dear sister Alison, as help me God, I shall thee never smite. He's all full of regret now because he's really hurt her. That I have done, it is thyself to white. White is to blame. So he's saying, oh, I'm so sorry I hit you, but I just want you to know it was your fault. They can't stay on one side of the argument here for very long. He says, forgive it me, and that I thee beseech, please, please forgive me. And yet, eftsoons I hit him on the cheek and said, thief, thus much am I wreak, there I'm revenged. Now will I die, I may no longer speak. She basically says, come here, kiss me, one last kiss, as soon as he gets close enough. So this is a real knockabout story, all right? But look what happens next. So they've had their big bust-up, but at last, with much care and woe, we Phil accorded by us selven too. So we sorted ourselves out. He gave me all the bridle in mine hand, a bridle being what you control a horse with. He handed me the bridle to have the governance of house and land. So this has kind of been a battle between equals. And in order to come to some kind of arrangement whereby they can continue to go forward, he says, right, I'll give you control of house and land, the material goods, and control of his tongue and of his hand also. So he doesn't get to talk back to her, he doesn't get to hit her. And then look at this, and made him bren his book anon right though. She said, Anne, here's the other part of the deal. Burn the book. I mean, she has gone for every bit of his authority. And what's the deal? What does he get out of this? Well, she says, and when that I had gotten unto me by mastery all the sovereignty, I'd been given complete sovereignty, complete power in this marriage, and that he said, my own true wife, do as thee lust, that is, do as you want, the term of all thy life. Keep thine honor, and keep also mine estate, my estate. He basically says, you can have your honor, you can have whatever you want, you can have the property. So what is he, I mean, how is this a deal? Well, look what happens. After that day, we had never debate. God help me so. I was to him as kind as any wife from Denmark unto India, and also true to him. I was faithful to him, and so was he to me. I pray to God that sit in majesty, so bless his soul for his mercy dear. Now, I will say my tale, if you will hear. I'm sure people are going, wow, that was just the story of her life. She says, we struck a bit of a bargain. We're going to talk a lot about that bargain because this is complex. She basically gets him to hand over everything. And what does he get back? A completely benevolent wife. Never a cross word, never a fight, never anything. What kind of deal is that? Quite complex and difficult to understand. So it is definitely an ambiguous point in their story. Who has the power in the end? I don't know. It's a very tense or complex deal that they've struck. So listen, that's what sets us up to hear the tale itself. Thank you very much for joining me and learning about the Wife of Bath's prologue, and I will see you again in the next talk where we will look at the tale itself. Thank you.